Thank you all so much for joining us today for Inflation Reduction Act 101. My name is Zach Williams. I am the Associate Director of Environment and Health and PSR National, and I am so delighted to have Cora Weint here from Rewiring America with us today, who is going to explain everything you need to know about how you can get the best bang for your buck and all of the wonderful things that the IRA has included in it. So without further ado, Cora, by all means, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Cora Weint. I'm Director of Research at Rewiring America. It's really great to be here, and I'm super excited to talk to you all about electrification and about the Inflation Reduction Act. And please, I think there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so please feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom. That's better than chat, right, Zach? Okay, great. And I will get sharing here. Great, can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So today I want to talk a little bit about electrification and then also the Inflation Reduction Act and what it means for you and each of your households. So what really motivates us to focus on electrification as an organization is that a full 42% of our energy-related emissions in the US come from decisions that are made around the kitchen table. That's a huge fraction of our emissions and a huge amount of power that households have to make different choices. So that 42% includes things like the cars that we drive, how we heat our homes and our water, how we cook our food, how we dry our clothes, and where our electricity comes from. And the solution to this, that how we get to that 42% of emissions down to zero, is electrifying everything, because clean electricity combined with electrification leads us to decarbonization. So that's what Rewiring America, our organization, is really focused on, is that electrification piece of this equation. So I want to talk a little bit about what the key technologies are that will enable us to electrify everything and save money and sort of improve the climate as we go. On the left here is a heat pump. So this is a machine that can both heat and cool your home. It replaces a furnace and an air conditioner, and it's 3 times more efficient than a fossil fuel or electric furnace. Heat pumps basically work by moving heat rather than creating it. So if you have a furnace, you're burning fossil fuels and that's creating the heat that you distribute around your home. But if you have a heat pump, you're actually able to take heat from the outside air, even when it's really cold outside, and move it inside and use that to heat your home. So heat pumps can be 300 or 400% efficient. So you're getting 3 times the amount of heat out as you put in as energy. The second technology here is a heat pump water heater. So this works exactly the same way as heat pump does. It's moving heat rather than creating it, but you're using that heat to heat your water rather than heating the air in your home. So you're moving heat from outside the water heater to inside the water heater. And these are also highly efficient. They're 3 times more efficient than a fossil fuel water heater, but still leads to the same comfort and same amount of hot water that you're used to in your home. The next 2 technologies are more home appliances. So on the left here is an induction stove. This is a stove that works via electricity, but unlike traditional electric resistance stoves with the red coils, this actually works by inducing electromagnetic fields in your pan. So it heats up the pan itself rather than heating up the cooktop. And these are responsive, they're fast, they're easy to clean. I have a little induction hot plate in my home and it's amazing. I love using it for cooking. It's much faster than my gas stove. Hoping to go to full induction someday. And I imagine that many of you are familiar with the health risks of having a gas stove inside the home, and switching to induction or even to electric removes that risk. And then on the right here is a heat pump dryer. We are personally fans of all electric dryers. I know a lot of people have just normal electric resistance dryers, but if you want to take that additional step towards energy efficiency, A heat pump dryer uses heat pump technology, so it can be 3 times more efficient than a fossil fuel dryer. It's gentler on your clothes and no venting is needed. And then finally, some technologies that most folks are familiar with. I saw someone posted in the chat about having an EV and solar. So electric vehicles, which save you a bunch of money on your energy when you switch from paying for gas to paying for electricity at home. They're fun to drive. And then rooftop solar, which allows you to power all of these electric appliances with the sun. So basically, electrification and renewable energy like rooftop solar pair really nicely together because you're switching to these appliances that can all take advantage of the solar, and then you're switching to solar so that you can power all those electric appliances cleanly. So I want to talk a little bit about the household benefits. That's a thing that we really focus on at Rewiring America, is calculating and trying to estimate for any household in the US what we think the impact would be of them switching to some of these technologies, so that we can tell someone, hey, you're a great candidate for a heat pump, you'll save $1,000 a year on your energy bills, or tell someone else, you know, your gas is really cheap in your area, a heat pump is not going to save you that much money quite yet, so wait a couple years. So we're really trying to figure out how we can accurately estimate the household benefits of electrification. And the average household could save about $1,700 a year on their energy bills if they electrified their home and their driving. And that increases even higher with solar. So I'm going to walk through some of the benefits of these specific appliances that I've talked about. So a heat pump can save the average home about $370 a year in the US, but that number varies a lot from place to place and from home to home. And in particular, if you're heating your home with fuel oil, propane, or electric resistance, savings can be much, much higher, greater than $1,000 per year. And then also in the Southeast, where electricity tends to be cheap relative to gas, heat pumps can save a lot more than this average number. And then the annual emissions reductions from a heat pump are 3 tons, which is a pretty massive impact on your carbon emissions. The next is a heat pump water heater. So again, significant financial savings and emissions reductions, about 0.5 tons of emissions reductions from switching to a heat pump water heater. The third one is an induction range, and cooking takes up generally a pretty small fraction of a household's energy use over the course of the year, but the really significant impacts of an induction range or an electric range are healthier indoor air. So I'm sure many of you know that having a gas stove in the home can increase the risk of childhood asthma by 42%. And one of my colleagues actually wrote a paper that came out a few months ago that you might be familiar with too, that showed that about 13% of childhood asthma in the US is attributable to gas stove use. So that's pretty significant, and just goes to show that there are a lot of co-benefits of electrification besides just the emissions reductions, and the money's a huge one there. A heat pump dryer is the next technology. Again, this is 3 times more efficient than a fossil or electric resistance dryer. And then an EV, again, this is a big money saver and reduces your emissions really significantly. So from our calculations, the average US household could save about $1,100 by switching to electric driving, and could reduce their emissions by 5 tons. And then finally, solar, similar financial savings to an EV and significant emissions reductions of about 2 tons. So I want to talk a little bit about the electrification transition and how fast we think it needs to happen. And we recently released a report that we call the Pace of Progress report that looks at sort of the speed of transition needed for different electric appliances. So the key assumption here is that we want to reach net zero by 2050 in the US. So we don't want to be burning any more fossil fuel in our homes or in our vehicles by that time. But there's a thing that happens because of appliance lifetimes, which is that your average furnace lasts about 15 years. So if you install a gas furnace in 2040, it's still going to be emitting fossil fuels in 2050, and then we haven't met our goals. So basically, what we looked at is based on appliance lifetimes when we need to be only selling clean electric appliances. So for that gas furnace example, we need to only be selling electric heat pumps by 2035 if we want every household to have a heat pump by 2050. So what we did is we looked at traditional adoption curves of a technology. So when a new technology becomes popular, like a cell phone or a color TV, or even electricity or refrigerators, its adoption typically follows an S-shaped curve where you have early adopters taking up this technology at first, and then it reaches the mass market, and then eventually you see the later adopters kicking in, and then you get to 100% adoption of this technology. And because of all the reasons I talked about earlier, we think that electric appliances are better than their fossil fuel incumbents, so that they'll follow these same S-shaped growth curves. So we modeled basically a series of growth curves for different electric appliances that allow us to reach our climate goals of net zero by 2050. So this is what that looks like for heat pumps. So currently heat pumps make up about 15 to 20% of sales of new space heating appliances in the US. And we show that number increasing to 100% by 2035. This isn't necessarily a market projection. This is just an assessment of what's required to meet our climate goals. And then we do a stock turnover model, which looks at basically how many space heating machines are getting retired year over year, and then apply the replacement proportions that are suggested by these sales curves, and we end up with stock curves. So that's the actual number of heat pumps or other machines in someone's home. So in the case of the electric heat pump, you can see that that reaches 100% adoption. 100% of heat pumps are in homes by 2050. And what we can also do is compare that to the existing growth rate of the heat pump market. So that's that gray dotted line here, and then the yellow line here is our sort of what's required by our climate goals, the sales, and assuming that S-shaped growth curve. And we show that by 2032, we need to increase heat pump sales 3 times over the business as usual scenario. So this is a lot. The heat pump market tripling in 10 years is a pretty lofty goal, but we think that we can really do this. And when I talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, that will sort of explain some of the incentives that will help us to get there. So we did similar modeling for these 5 electric technologies and looked at what we think would happen under business as usual given the current market growth rates, and then what we think would happen under these S-shaped growth curves over the next 3 years. And what we showed is that we need to effectively increase the sales of electric machines by 14 million sales above the business as usual market case over the next 3 years. So 14 million machines sounds like a lot, but there are 120 million households in the US. So really that just means less than 1% of less than 10% of households in the US taking one of these actions over the next 3 years. So 10% of households deciding to do either a heat pump install or get an EV or install an induction stove. And we think that's really reasonable. So the power in looking at these pace of progress curves is that it gives us a set of targets that we can aspire to put ourselves on this like longer term growth trajectory. And we've seen a lot of interest from local governments, state governments in sort of charting their climate targets based on these types of curves. All right, so how do we do this? How do we get to 14 million machines? And we think this is where the Inflation Reduction Act comes in, because there are a lot of incentives in the IRA that will accelerate household electrification. So typically in the Inflation Reduction Act, incentives fall under 2 categories. There's tax credits and there's rebates. So tax credits are money that you get back when you pay your taxes each year. And an important distinction here is that in the IRA, these are credits, not deductions. So a tax deduction just reduces your taxable income, but a tax credit is actually directly money back on the taxes you pay. So a tax deduction is typically less valuable than a credit, and everything I'm going to be talking about today is a tax credit rather than a deduction. And the second category is rebates. So these are direct money that is not tied to whether or not you owe taxes, that you get back when you purchase one of these electric appliances or when you do certain upgrades in your home. So I'm going to run through a variety of different programs today, and I'll try to go a little bit slowly because it's a lot of information. And then at the end, I'll share some tools that we have at Rewiring America to help you sort of summarize what you're eligible for, given where you live and your income and that sort of thing. So I'm going to start by talking about some consumer tax credits. And the first is the energy efficient tax credit, which is also known as 25C. So this is a 30% tax credit for residential efficiency and electrification upgrades up to $3,200 per year. And the way that breaks down is that heat pumps and heat pump water heaters qualify for up to a $2,000 tax credit per year. And then everything else, so that's energy efficient windows, that's panel upgrades, that's doors, that's insulation, all the other energy efficiency upgrades qualify together for up to $1,200. And certain things in there have their own limits, like a panel upgrade, you can get $600 for. But basically, if you installed a heat pump, you could get $2,000 for that. If you also installed insulation, you could get $1,200 for that maximum. And then combined, that would sum up to the $3,200 total per year. And these tax credits are available to anyone who basically owes money in federal taxes, including renters. They can't be carried forward. So if you don't owe enough in taxes in a given year, you can't sort of roll that over to next year. And these tax credits are available now through 2032. So this is a program that we're really excited about, and I think will help a lot of people install these electric technologies. Last thing that it's worth noting on this is that you do have to meet certain efficiency standards for your heat pump and your heat pump water heater, and those are listed on the IRS website, which I can drop in the chat at the end here. The second tax credit is the Clean Energy Tax Credit, or 25D. So this is a 30% tax credit for the purchase and installation of solar panels, geothermal heat pumps, or battery storage. And this tax credit existed before, but the amount had started to ramp down. So it was at something like 22% last year before the IRA, and it's been re-upped and increased to 30%. And battery storage has been added in. Previously, it was just for solar. And again, same idea that this is available to anyone with enough federal tax liability, but unlike the last tax credit, this one can be carried forward. So if you install a $21,000 solar system and you get a $7,000 tax credit, but you only owe $2,000 on your taxes, you can sort of roll that tax credit over into future years, and over time recoup the full amount of the tax credit on your taxes. And this one is available through 2034 and is also retroactive to 2022. All right, so now we're moving in from the tax credits into the EV discounts. And there are two programs I'll talk about here. The first is for purchasing a new EV. So this is a $7,500 tax credit. Most households are eligible, although these credits have certain income caps and sales price caps. So if you make higher than the income caps, or if your vehicle is more expensive than the sales caps, you don't qualify, but most people in the US will qualify based on income and based on vehicle sales price. The caveat here is that only vehicles that meet certain mineral, battery component, and final assembly requirements qualify. and the list is here, and I'll make sure to drop this in the chat at the end. Actually, let me see if I can do that now before I forget. Okay. Oh, that was just to host and panelists. Let me send to everyone. Okay, great, because that's a useful list to have if you're considering buying an EV. And the great thing about this tax credit is that for this year, it works the same as the last tax credits, that you have to owe money in taxes to be able to take advantage of this. But starting in 2024, this can be transferred to dealers so that your dealer can basically give you that upfront discount on your car and they can claim the tax credit. So that will be great because that won't require everyone to have to owe money on their taxes to purchase a new EV and get this credit. And the last thing I'll mention here is that you can actually lease a vehicle, and that does not subject you to the same requirements. So a larger list of EVs qualifies if you're leasing a vehicle. The second EV credit is the credit for used EVs. That's 25E, and that's a $4,000 tax credit for purchasing a used EV. Same situation here, that these credits are income limited and vehicle sale price limited. But again, most households will qualify. And then also the same situation, that the credit will be transferable to dealers starting in 2024 and essentially convert into an upfront discount for folks who don't have any tax liability. And the vehicle does have to be purchased through a dealer to qualify for this tax credit. It can't be sort of like a, just a person-to-person sale. And then the one EV discount that's not included in here is that there's also a $1,000 discount or tax credit for installing an EV charger if you live in a rural or low-income area. All right, so the last sort of category of IRA incentives I want to talk about are consumer rebates. The first is the electrification rebates. This is a program that we're really excited about because we helped to make sure that this got into the IRA, and we think this will really help a lot of low and moderate income households electrify. So this is point of sale rebates up to $14,000 for electric appliances, including heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, induction stoves, panel upgrades, and rewiring. And the way this works is basically 100% of project costs are covered for low-income households and 50% for moderate income households. And there are certain per equipment caps on how much you can get back as a rebate. So for a heat pump, that cap is $8,000. So for example, if a low-income household installed a heat pump for $10,000, they could get $8,000 back as a rebate. If a moderate income household installed a heat pump for $10,000, they would get half of that, so $5,000, as long as it's under that $8,000 cap. And then the caps on other pieces of equipment, for example, heat pump water heaters are about $1,750, stoves and dryers are $840, panel upgrades are $4,000, and rewiring is $2,500. So the way that this works is that this money is going to flow from the federal government to state energy offices, and then each state has to stand up its own rebate program and figure out how to who qualifies and how to distribute the funds. We expect to roll out most likely in 2024. At this point, there might be one or two states who get their programs up and running by the end of this year. But at this point, we're saying mostly 2024 is when we're expecting these programs to launch. And I often get the question of whether this can apply retroactively. Our best guess is that this will probably not be able to apply retroactively because I think there will be a lot of demand for this program already once it launches, just given the people who are planning to install these appliances in the future. All right, and then the last program I'm going to talk about is the efficiency rebates. So these are rebates for large-scale projects that improve a home's energy efficiency. Everyone can get one of these rebates, although the rebates for low-income households are doubled. This is a similar situation to the last program where state energy offices are finalizing this program right now. And we expect to roll out likely in 2024 at this point. There are basically two different ways to prove that you've achieved energy savings and claim this rebate. There's a modeled savings pathway and a measured savings pathway. And the total amount of the rebate basically depends on your income. It depends on whether you use the modeled or the measured pathway. And then it depends on the amount of energy savings that the project generates. But it can be up to $8,000 for a low-income household and up to $4,000 for a non-low income household. All right, so that was a lot of information, but here is a cheat sheet of all the programs I just talked about. And the ones with the yellow bar here are programs that are available now. So we've got the electrification or efficiency tax credits, the solar and storage tax credits, the EV tax credits that basically convert into upfront discounts next year, the electrification rebates, and the energy efficiency rebates. And we know that this is a lot to wade through with sort of the different standards for qualifying, whether, it's based on income or based on geography. So we created what we hope will be a helpful tool, which is our IRA savings calculator that allows you to see how much money you'll get from the IRA given your location, given your income, given your household size. So let me drop that link into the chat.
I just did, Cora. You're all good.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I didn't have it pulled up. So we hope that this is helpful for wading through the sea of incentives available from the IRA. And then I did want to plug one other tool that we've recently been developing and would love to hear all of your feedback on. And this is our new website, homes.rewiringamerica.org. Our previous website is more sort of policy focused, more directed towards advocates. And this new website is really supposed to be for households who are trying to figure out how to electrify. So we have sort of a section for homeowners and a section for renters. And then we have project guides for a variety of projects. So whether you're doing a heat pump install, a heat pump water heater install, whether you're upgrading your electrical panel, we have a step-by-step guide and a series of articles for each of them. And this is a new tool, so we'd welcome any feedback that you have on how we can make it better or more helpful for all of you. So with that, I'll close and take any questions, but thank you all so much for coming today, and thanks for listening, and looking forward to staying in touch. Here's my email and our website, and I can now answer any questions.
Cora, thank you so much for going through all of that. There really is just so much money that is on the table for us to electrify our homes. So the first question that I have in the Q&A is from David Corbin, who says, I've heard that for rooftop solar, that depreciation over time would be greater than the 30% tax credit. Is this true?
The depreciation over time would be greater than the... I'm not sure if I understand the question.
David, do you want to clarify maybe a little bit in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you if you would like to explain a little bit more?
Hello?
Hello, how you doing, David?
Yes, what it means is each year, like a home, you get to depreciate so much each year. And the total that you could depreciate on the solar panels could be greater than the 30%.
I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not super familiar with
For
home
example,
depreciation.
on one that I have, the depreciation for the first year was $1,100. For the solar panels and battery backup. And then each year it would not be that much, but obviously if you're a renter, this is no good. But if you happen to own the place and you plan to stay there, I'm just wondering, maybe you could check and see if that's true.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into that and get back to you. Um I think from what we've seen, the average cost of a solar install in the US is greater than $20,000. So that would amount to somewhere around a seven or $8,000 tax credit. So yeah, I'm not super familiar with how to think of that relative to the depreciation. I guess the way that I've thought of it so far is just, you're getting 30% off on your purchase of solar panels, and that just reduces the upfront cost. But I can try to get an answer on the depreciation question too.
Thank you so much, David, for your question. And maybe drop your email in the chat or take a note of Cora's email, and we'll be sure to get back to you with an answer on that. All right. So our next question comes from Eric Sullivan, who asks, is the Homes program / credit available for work done in 2023?
Great question. As far as we know, the Homes program and HERA, which are the electrification rebates, are not going to be retroactive. So we don't think that those programs will be available until 2024, and they'll only be available for programs installed or for projects that are installed after the date which they become available. So unfortunately, I don't think those will be available for projects done in 2023.
Thank you, Cora. For our next question is another one from Eric Sullivan, who asks, I've been having a hard time finding contractors who are experienced in heat pumps and heat pump water heaters in the Chicago area. Are there any good resources to find well-experienced folks to discuss and install these kinds of projects?
Yep, that's another great question. So that I know that that's something that we're working on at Rewiring America, is how we can vet contractors who have electrification experience and sort of release networks of contractors who we've vetted in certain areas. And I know there are a couple other organizations who are working on that too. I'm not aware of anything in the Chicago area right now. In California, I know there's a great database of contractors through the Switches On. In the Chicago area, I'm trying to think of suggestions for that area specifically. One thing that you could consider doing is, if you have any utility or local government heat pump rebate programs that you know of, you could reach out to them and see if they have any recommendations. I also know that there's a nonprofit called Elevate that's been installing heat pumps in low-income households in Chicago, and they do amazing work. And they might have a recommendation, but I'm not aware of a great resource for Chicago yet on that.
I would also add, similarly to the local utility, contacting them to see if they have contacts. If you want to interact with your state government, the Illinois Department of Energy too may have some database for certifications for contractors to install these kinds of more advanced and more modern technologies. So if you would like to sift through the state government's contacts, that's also could be a good way to find a trusted contractor. So those are the 3 questions that were dropped into the chat. I would open up the floor right now if anyone has any additional questions, anything that comes to mind from all of the information that you heard today. You can either throw that into the Q&A box, or at this point, throw it right into the chat if that's easier for all of us to see. So opening up the floor. Any other questions for Cora here about any information in the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act? Oh, Cora, you know what? I have a question. So for these credits, I know you called this out on some of the slides for the going through each the who, what, when, where, the details about each of the tax credits and rebates. But if I'm a renter say, and I care about electrifying my home, but I live in a, multifamily, multi-story building that's owned by a landlord. How do I go about taking advantage of some of these incentives?
That's a good question. So a lot of these are available for renters, like the 25C tax credit. Renters are eligible for that. The HERA electrification rebates, renters are also eligible for that. If you're a renter, you're probably not going to go and upgrade your water heater to a heat pump water heater and spend the money doing that. That's probably not realistic. You know, I was recently a renter, definitely would not have done that. And you don't really have control usually over your space heating system in your building. One thing that renters can do is that for HERA, we're working really hard to do some sort of like lobbying to try to get window unit heat pumps to qualify for HERA. So this is a really fantastic new technology that replaces a window unit AC, but it also works for heating. And it's portable, so you can pick it up and move it with you when you leave your place. And there are some really nice looking and really functional ones. Like there's one from a company called Gradient that actually allows you to close your window completely, unlike a typical window unit AC, because it just kind of hangs over the windowsill. So we're working really hard on making sure that window unit heat pumps qualify. And then if you're a renter, I would say most of my suggestions are focused around getting sort of portable appliances. Like there's a portable induction burner that you can get for under $100 on Amazon that are amazing. I have one and it's great. And then the last thing I'd say is talk to your landlord about this. There are a lot of incentives in the IRA that are directed at landlords or that landlords can apply for. So talk to your landlord or get some other tenants in your building together to talk to your landlord about electrifying your home, your full home heating system or your water heating system.
Great. Thank you so much. I currently rent right now, so I'm always wondering how I can actually bring some electric appliances into my home. On the follow-up email to this webinar as well, PSR has a fact sheet devoted entirely to how to talk to your landlord specifically about gas stoves, because it's the health component, but it gives you a little tips and tricks as to how to, make the pitch to your landlord about, hey, I don't want a nitrogen dioxide producing device in my kitchen. Can we please switch it out for an electric induction stove? And to give a shout out, just like Cora did right now, to the induction burners, that is also a great option. Even if you're not, it's not for efficiency or an environmental thing. Simply not using that gas stove as much dramatically reduces the amount of nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and particulate matter that's going to be in your home and kitchen. So that single or double unit induction burner, that countertop plug-in, plug-out appliance, is going to be a great, great saver if you don't have, the thousands of dollars right now, or if you rent to get an electric induction stove. So I see we have some more questions in the chat, which is great. Let me go through them real quick. So Eric has another question about the homes credit. Is that credit on top of the 25C credit for installing things like heat pumps? So might make sense to delay a project that like that until 2024, so they have that option.
Yep. So the two rebate programs, Homes and HERA, those two cannot be stacked together. So if you install a heat pump, you can't get both the electrification rebate and the measured savings based efficiency rebate, but you can stack either of those with 25C. So you can kind of combine the tax credit and the rebate, but you can't combine the two rebate programs. The thing that I would say is that the rebate programs have an extremely limited budget. It's $4.5 billion, which sounds like a lot, but once you start dividing that by $14,000 per home, they probably won't be able to cover everyone who wants to take advantage of those programs. And I think with the increased demand, it's likely that prices might go up for a couple years. So I've generally been encouraging people to to do the install now and to not necessarily wait for those rebate programs to become available just because of the limited availability and the possibility that prices will go up. I'd encourage folks to get started, take advantage of the tax credit now, if that's a possibility for your home.
Great, thank you. All right, I see another question here in the chat from Katie. I asked a local installer, Minnesota, where it gets cold, about installing heat pumps, and he said I would still need a gas furnace as a backup and for air handling. Do I still need a gas furnace, or and when can I find out more to make the best purchase? Where can I find out more to make the best purchase?
Yes, so keeping a gas furnace as a backup in cold climates is an option. It's not necessary. There are cold climate heat pumps that work down to -10, -15 degrees. So you definitely don't need one. I will say that in places like Minnesota right now, it's having a gas furnace can help make the heat pump more economical. Because as you get to really cold temperatures, it basically becomes more expensive to run your heat pump than to run your gas furnace. We're hoping that that's not the case in the very near term, but right now, at least, that's kind of how the economics work out. So if you're not that sensitive to the economics of it, I would definitely say get a cold climate heat pump and go all the way. They will work in the cold. But if if the bill savings piece really matters to you, then keeping your gas furnace as a backup, at least for now, can kind of help make that sort of make it more economical for your bill savings. And needing a gas furnace for air handling, that's not necessary. You can get a separate air handler that's not a gas furnace for a heat pump. Yeah, I guess you can go either way, but it's not required to have a gas furnace for air handling.
Great. And where would you say would be the best place to find the information to like compare manufacturers, compare models? Where could folks go to find the resources to make the best purchase?
Yeah, so one resource is there's a database of cold climate heat pumps by Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, NEEP. I can drop the link to that in the chat, and they have a ton of great resources on all the different cold climate heat pump models.
Great. That resource would be incredible because I know that's the component that I think a lot of people are worrying about is when it's 65 and sunny, all well and good, but if it's 114 in the shade or -10 outside, how can we make sure that the heat pump is going to produce what we want? And I think there's been a lot of studies proving that like, no, heat pumps work. Even in southern Canada and northern United States, like heat pumps will work,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, places like Maine are actually installing heat pumps faster than anywhere else in the country. So they definitely do work in cold climates. Right now in certain areas, and this is only in a really small fraction of the country, mostly in the Midwest, just the economics are why some people might want to keep a backup fossil fuel system. But again, we're really hoping and thinking that those economics will shift within the next 5 years or so. But let me drop the heat pump product list, and then the one other thing I'll say is that the heat is not a problem for heat pumps. They work the same as an AC, so you won't have any problems with your heat pump performing in hot weather. Yeah.
And what you said with the economics of it all, I think back to, in 1999, a 30-inch TV costed, a couple $1,000s, and now you could go to Best Buy and get a 50-inch very thin LCD TV for a couple hundred maybe. So, right now it might be prohibitively expensive, but in a couple of years with the trends that we're seeing, I think it'll make a whole lot of sense for a whole lot more people to make the electric transition.
Definitely.
Barbara, I see great that you've been using an induction cooker for 12 years. That's incredible. And also, you live in a building that is over 100 years old with windows only in the front and in the back. Will heat pumps work for me?
Yes, heat pumps should definitely work for you. I think the windows shouldn't have a bearing on it. or I'm not sure if you're saying you're a renter and you need a window unit heat pump, or if you're just asking in general for your building. So feel free to drop that in the chat to clarify if you want. But yes, in general, heat pumps. Okay, got it. Heat pumps will work for you. The thing with older buildings is that sometimes you might want to add more insulation too if you haven't sort of upgraded your insulation in your building, so that you can end up installing a smaller heat pump and save some money on the heat pump install. But yes, heat pumps should work in basically any building.
Great. And there is a question from Royal Graves in the Q&A. Will the slide deck be available?
Yes, yeah, I'm happy to share with you, Zach, and have you share with everyone who attended.
Absolutely. You will also get a follow-up email from me with the slides from Cora, as well as some fact sheets about how to talk to your landlord if you rent, about how to convince them, rather, persuade them to make the electric transition in their building that you live in. As well as I could also attach some fact sheets about the health effects of gas appliances to push you a little bit more towards electrification as well, if the health voice is a more persuasive argument as well. Alrighty, so that was the last question in the chat that I see and the last question in the Q&A box. I'll give it one last college try. Any other comments, questions, concerns from anyone in the audience for Cora today?
I'll make one other comment to Barbara's question, which is kind of like, will heat pumps work for me if I have, this type of building? One thing that might be helpful for folks to know is that depending on your current heating system, there might be a different type of heat pump that works best for you. So if you currently have a furnace and you have ducts in your home, like air ducts, you can swap to a ducted heat pump that basically is a heat pump plus an air handler, and it just uses that same duct system. If you're in a home where you have electric resistance baseboards for heating, or if you have like a boiler with radiators, then you might want to switch to something that's called a mini split or a ductless heat pump. And those are systems where you basically have an outdoor unit and an indoor unit. It's like mounted up on the wall. It's kind of the stereotypical what you think of if you think of a heat pump. And that's a really good option if you don't already have ductwork in your home, because you can basically just sort of pass a small refrigerant line through the wall.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Barbara, if you have electric heating and it's not a heat pump, you would be the perfect candidate for getting a heat pump, because electric heating is basically only ever 100% efficient. If you switch to a heat pump, it's going to be at least as efficient, if not way more efficient than your electric heating. So even without insulation, a heat pump should save you a lot of money. So definitely look into that.
Great. I see we have a question from Tim saying that he installed a heat pump water heater and an induction stove last year. Great job. And just did an HVAC heat pump recently. Great job again. But however, will he not get those credits then if he already performed the work?
So for the work done last year, you likely will not get the credits. For the heat pump that you installed this year, you should be able to get that $2,000 tax credit. So when it comes time to file your taxes next April, you should definitely report your heat pump HVAC install and get the tax credits on it. The rebate programs, because they're not going to be retroactive, most likely you won't be eligible for those, but tax credits, you should be eligible for your heat pump HVAC install and get about $2,000 back on your credits.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, folks. So we are just almost at time. So if no one else has any other questions, Cora, thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of this wonderful, wonderful information with us. I will be sure to send up a follow-up email with all of the slides and all the information that we talked about today. And without any further ado, everyone have a wonderful rest of your week. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.